Guys, thank you so much for watching today. We got two great guests, Mr. Tom Luongo and Mr. Ian Burlingame on Thursday, April 10th, 2025 at 1:03 p.m. Eastern Time. Like what I just told you guys, the I guess predecessor to this show was the one EM and I did about the world being a global bar fight, and then yeah, somebody posted that in Tom's Substack or Telegram or whatever the fuck, and Incestra, as I was just telling you guys. I just sometimes plug pieces in, and sometimes it turns into something great. Sometimes it turns to like a radioactive fire that I scold myself for doing. It rarely does the latter. So that's about as much as planning as I have for today. But yeah, that's just kind of where we were. Actually, it's kind of funny because EM bringing up he's like, I don't think England's our ally or UK is our ally. I'm like, well, that's Luongo. And then I had Clay Martin on the other day, and he was like, yeah, no, he's like, fuck them. He's like, I think we're closer to Russia than we are to them. So I don't know. That just might be like a general stepping off point of like the rising tide of like, what does Europe contribute? And I love it, and I'm here for it, and I love it. Yeah,
They don't even contribute pretty women anymore. So what do they got?
nothing. They really have nothing. They really
Well,
have,
all the pretty women are in Eastern Europe, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
That
Oh my God, like I don't, we don't, I don't need to like do podcasts with Eastern European hosts. It's female hosts. It's never a good time. I just have to, like, turn the camera off to stop from drooling.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, I have a weakness. It's
Hey
so.
man, hey man, it's okay to have that. EM would because you brought something up interesting when we talked about kind of like these not so subtle indicators or telegraphing that not only do we not have EU, UK's back, like hey guys, you want to go fight Russia, like have fun, bring a lunch, but like we're not picking you up. But you also kind of fleshed out the idea that and if things implode over there your like your military is more so on the same page as we, the United States, are. Could you like just touch on that briefly, and then I just expand from there?
Yeah, so not so much in the continent, and that's a thing that, we need to be careful of, is that those of the British Isles and the continent have been at war for a couple thousand years since Tom's people 2000-ish years ago showed up on our borders, right? So we've been at war, and the English-speaking civilization emerged in direct refutation to continentals, and we fought that out quite a bit of times. So it's not necessarily the continental militaries, which are useless. Well, they can change that though. They've done that before. But it's more the British Isles, the Irish and the English. I would say the Scottish too, but I don't know what the hell's happening in the homeland of my mother, right?
um, English socialism,
Yeah, well, they're
like
sure
what
trying.
the welfare state did
Yeah,
to the black family, and what
yeah,
slavery couldn't do in 300 years in America, it took 60 years to do in the United States, which is destroy the black family. It's the same thing in
yeah.
Scotland.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely true. Yeah. Wales as well. And they've been
Mm-hmm.
trying to do it with Ireland. Yeah. So it's not so much the continental militaries, it's the British and Irish militaries. And it's less the Irish military, although there's elements of that too, but more the Irish people.
Mm-hmm.
48% of American population has Irish blood,
Home team.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Almost 50% of the presidents in the United States, in the history of the United States, were Irish.
Yeah,
And a
yeah, yeah.
little over 50 were Scots, Scots Irish.
Right, right, right.
So
But for years, like you talk to people of Scottish descent, and they say, well, what are you? And they say, well, I'm American, because they
yeah,
wouldn't want to admit that they were Scottish,
yeah,
because
yeah,
the antipathy towards the Scots, especially here in the South where I am,
yeah, oh
was
yeah,
so very strong. And it was
oh
only
yeah,
I have to actually credit Mel Gibson for bringing back a little bit of Scottish pride, right? Because Braveheart really did like bring them out. They were like actually allowed to express the fact that yes, again, no, I'm of Scots Irish descent, but like
yeah,
I remember reading an article of Lou Rockwell ages ago where somebody, I don't remember who it was, but he wrote a great article talking about the old culture, the old cultural divide, and how the roots of the Civil War are really in many ways the English Civil Wars, again, the English versus the Scots and the Irish,
Yeah.
played out on the American soil,
Yeah.
because you had the northeastern Tories, and then all the Scots, certainly all the Scots ran to the hills,
Yeah.
and that's why hillbilly and redneck, if I understand correctly, correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, but they are really derogatory terms that go back to the Scots and the Irish
Yeah.
first, and then they're, and then they've been
Yeah.
grafted onto Americans here, and that still exists so deeply in American culture, and it's so deeply in the American divide, and it's something that we have a real hard time. A lot of people today don't understand that at all, and I'm like, no, it's like right in your face,
Yeah.
and and that was, of course, those divisions were then used during the Civil War to, you know,
Well, and they're still being used, right?
of course,
All those old petty grievances, et cetera, are still being used.
the cultural differences, right?
Yeah.
The very fact that you look at the way Hollywood still treats the South, right?
Mhm.
And I can't watch. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, right? I'm a New York Italian. My dad went on the NYPD when it was dominated by Irish, and he had a hard time. I remember him like complaining bitterly about how hard it was for him to operate because his name ended in a vowel. I mean, this is like a direct quote from my dad, and so there was always that within my household. But then I moved to the South when I went to school. When I left, graduated high school, went to school in the South, and I've been here ever since. And to watch this as a transplanted New Yorker, and to be honest with you, recovering Yankee, um, I have nothing but sympathy for these people. Like, I get it. I get what the problem is, and I see it very, very clearly. When I go back to New York, it's like, and I rarely do, or when I interact with people from New York, it's in that area of the world. It's like night and day. They still think that they're all backward down here. Like
Dude,
Yeah.
dude, as someone that went to the University of Georgia, I went to high school in Atlanta, and I did my first 2 years of college at Valdosta, Georgia, which is the fucking deep South. And
yeah, well,
man,
that's like 80 miles north of where I am,
yeah, no,
like right on the border. Yeah.
Valdosta is way down there. But
Oh yeah,
even
yeah.
yeah, even University of Georgia, I mean, University of Georgia had more accepted applicants to the medical schools in the big southeastern or the big southeastern medical schools than any other feeder school. Alabama, it's like that's where a lot of the space race, like high fucking tech industries are. No one ever thinks about that. Mike Duran, the Black Hawk Down pilot, his company Pinnacle Solutions is there because that's where, in his words, that's where all the brain power is.
Yeah.
So in general, when you kind of look at that disdain for what, kind of Hollywood has for something like, or even New England has for the South, you're damn there. It does kind of mirror the way that, I mean, you could say something like the UK or even all of the EU kind of looks down their nose at America. Well, well, over here in the EU, and
Exactly.
it's like, hey man, hey
Exactly.
man, you're looking down on people who are quantitatively, not just like anecdotal,
Yeah.
like, well, I knew a smart guy. I mean, quantitatively on the sheets where they told us at UGA, they're like, don't apply to this med school because they take so many Georgia students that they do have a quota to cut you off quantitatively. So if you mirror that and you look at how the UK and the EU look at us, and then you can understand that that's how the West Coast and New England looks at, I don't know, let's say the Southeast, you do start to see that, yeah, just because they say and just because they've had control of, historically bigger platforms, be it Hollywood or your nighttime just soulless suit, Jimmy Fallon or Trevor Noah, and they all say the same shit. It doesn't necessarily reflect reality. And then you have the point where eventually, when you see how much of a detachment from reality there is, the people who are being looked down on start to their balls drop and they're like, "Hey, wait, fuck that." It goes from just saying that's not true to fuck that. And then you start standing up straight and going, but fuck that and fuck your mother
How
too.
about, yeah, yeah? It's like, yeah, it's let's go Brandon,
Yeah.
real quick.
So this is
I mean,
what the Continentals have done to control the English-speaking people for the last 350 years.
mhm.
They realized they couldn't beat us militarily, couldn't conquer us, couldn't take the islands. It's not like great empires haven't tried. So what do? They figured out in the 1600s, we'll put a puppet king on there, a Danish king, William of Orange. We'll, plus up the industrialists with European continental monies so that we have the banking system, so that we control the city of London. And you've got a paper king on there that doesn't have any real power of himself because the nobility doesn't have any loyalty to him because he's not English. And then we'll just keep the English, the Irish, the Scotch, the Welsh, and the Midlanders and the Londoners and the East Anglians and everybody else, all in these old battles and fights with one another. And also they go to Australia, New Zealand, the United States. It doesn't matter. It's the same people. We're all the
Right.
English civilization, right? We have
Mhm.
conversations about, my mother's a Wallace. My mother's, from over there. And we have conversations and you think so and so did something. And be like, last week? Oh no, that was 300 years ago. Right? It's like we don't forget things. We don't, you know, something that happened 1,000 years ago, that's still in the family's memory.
No,
But the problem is it's used again and again and again by this continental mindset to keep us all warring with one another. Why? They've lived parasitically off the British Empire since the late 1600s. And they've been doing it increasingly since the 1940s with the United States. Look at the structures the Dulles brothers put in place. That started in Wall Street. CIA came later, right? All that stuff came later. So while I agree, Tom, that the City of London is a problem,
Mhm.
and while I agree that the Crown is a problem, it is a problem because we've been an occupied people going back to the late 1600s.
I would argue. I would argue. I would not argue with you about that.
Yeah.
And part of what and understand that my understanding of some of this stuff is a little, is hard won and recent. So don't. I'm open to listening to different perspectives on this. So I'll probably sit back and listen a lot at some point during this. What I'll say is, I think it's been pretty clear and pretty obvious that that there's a divide, right? There's a divide between the English people, the Britons, who would Britons, Britons, and British leadership, and whoever happens to be running the United Kingdom at this point. There's a fundamental difference between Great Britain and the United Kingdom and bubble, all of that. So, which is terribly complicated in that respect. And to me, like, I champion the hell out of Brexit. I spent every day because I could see how important, I knew how important it was, because I understood it was absolutely no different than what we saw here in the United States when Ron Paul hit the stage. And the remnant finally stood up, as Gary North used to put it. The remnant stood up and said, "This is enough."
Yeah.
And then the question was going to be, of course, how was it going to get co-opted? By whom and in what way, and how are they going to fight it? And you knew Brexit had to be the right thing because the European Union was so unbelievably against it, in the same way that they're against Trump, and the same way they're against anybody else who stands up to their enlightened ideas. Let's just put it that way. And I, of course, use that term with all due derision.
Yeah.
So,
well, you down there in the South like to say, "Oh, bless their little heart."
Oh, bless their heart.
Oh, bless their
Oh,
heart.
bless your heart. Oh yeah. I the first time I ran into that, I was like, oh, I felt for it about 2 times, and then I'm like, you're not really happy with me, are you?
Yeah.
Bless their heart.
Yeah.
No, it's
it's my response to European continentals. Oh, bless their little heart.
Oh,
yeah, but
bless your little hearts. Exactly. No, that's good. That's very good. I like it.
100,000-foot view, though. I mean, kind of what's going on.
A Reznik view.
Yeah, Reznik, yes. But like what we're seeing right now is no, that's a great view. It's just, it accelerates too fast. But what they're doing right now, in general, though, what is the like if you just had to you get 5 seconds to look at the map and you go what, and you get one sentence to say what it is. USAID to the border, to NATO, to the tariffs in general, is this not at the highest level deglobalization, or do you think this is a move to poke Europe to get them to start paying and shoring up and getting involved, which in a sense is not really deglobalization, that's more of a building up of NATO? Is it, or is there?
I think we're Brexiting from the 1680s.
That,
I think we're Brexiting from Westphalia.
And I know sometimes when I don't understand what someone says, sometimes they say explain that for the audience, but I'm just gonna be very honest. I don't know what the fuck that means.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me? Can you explain that for the audience? By that I mean me.
The Irish.
Can you
Explain
explain
for
that?
the
Can you
Irish in
explain
the
it for the
room.
audience who happens to look and sound exactly like me right here, right now? Yeah. But
Oh,
what
go
it,
ahead, Ian. This is
what
good.
it, but what is Brexiting from six? What does that mean just for me?
So the event that is driving the modern world over the last 400 years, almost 400 years now, is what's called the Peace of Westphalia. Two treaties, Innsbruck and Munster, 1645, 1649, fascinating period of time. What it was the transition from hereditary princes to merchant princes and bankers as the ones who are guiding and driving and owning the ship. That didn't happen quite in the British Isles, which was, beginning to become an empire under the British East Indies Company because it had a very strong hereditary monarchy and nobility and was quite successful. And Henry VIII had broken from the Catholic Church quite substantially, and they had fought that out under Elizabeth. And so there wasn't their ability to do this religious warfare in the British Isles that they were able to do on the continent to put themselves into power. So they took a king out. They worked with the Congress, Pym, the parliamentarian, the industrialists. They used the guilds, regulators, and their bully boys, and they tore the king down, King Charles I, who was fighting for the people to try and prevent all of this. Cromwell came in. Cromwell tries to do the same thing, although in his, dictatorial way. And I'm no fan of Cromwell, but I understand him. Um, Cromwell's son was set up to, for all intents and purposes, be the next king, although not titularly. Although Cromwell's the only man buried as a king in the United Kingdom that wasn't a king. And I believe he's in Westminster there, but I could be mistaken about that. But the point is that the fight that had happened on the continent that led to this Westphalian world, right? This Westphalian modern world based off of banking, finance, international trade, the quote unquote rule of law, nation states, etc. That was basically the end of feudalism. We fought it in the United Kingdom, what would become the United Kingdom in the British Isles for about 40 years, 50 years. Cromwell's son proved to be incapable of playing this game at this, that 100,000-foot game, the 25,000, 100,000-foot game. So they brought one of the Stuarts back over. He was just a drunken womanizer. And so finally they brought William of Orange over. This is the industrialists and the parliamentarians, because that's who now had the power, the parliamentarians, not the princes, ostensibly over the people and the exchequer. And in 1688, he brought an army over funded by Continentals and took the crown of England by force at the invitation of the parliamentarians and the industrialists that were building up on the Thames River there at the time, who needed the labor for their factories, who had the labor, the princes in the agrarian world. And so what happened in 1688 is this thing called the Glorious Revolution, which is the biggest PR stunt in the history of the world. It was anything but. And ever since, the United Kingdom, the British Empire that would build out from there has at the top been controlled by continental banks ever since.
And so, how does that factor into the
So,
formation of the Bank of England in 1694?
It's a direct extension of that.
Right. Right.
Comes directly out of that, because what was happening is the Continentals still had all their own conflicts. The British Isles weren't caught up in that. And they had an empire that was building out around the world. Well, you've got to infiltrate that empire. You got to control that empire. You got to use that energy and impulse and drive. Well, how do you do that? You control the city of London. You control the king on the throne. You make sure the king never has enough real power so that they're safe and secure on their own. And you build up the parliamentarians that you own. And you transition power from hereditary princes to merchant princes. Yeah, go ahead.
And then you control the monetary system.
Correct. Correct.
and
Because in
you
the
ultimately control the
Westphalian,
monetary system, the central bank, where you can now control. Because
absolutely.
my argument at this
Yeah.
point has been that since then, I very intuitively, ages and ages ago, having read, and I only got this idea in my head when I read Neil Stephenson's The Baroque Cycle, where he talks about
Yeah. Yeah.
that whole sequence. But I didn't understand much of the history that he was going into at that point. But clearly, the formation of the Bank of England in 1694 was the beginning of this era of history in
Yes.
many ways.
Yes.
And so what I've been saying is that what we need is we're coming to the end of this period of history where that style of central bank control of currency and currency arbitrage has to end. We have to get to an end of that, and the only way we get to an end of that is, again, to get rid of the central banks and go back to hard currency and a world that's going to be ruled by tariffs and and comparative advantage, as opposed to, and hard currency, as opposed to issuing debt effectively to now we've morphed it now into a system of debt against labor as the unit of currency, which is effectively slavery. This is now, we live in a feudal world. We don't live in a post-feudal world. We live in a feudal world. The system is that we're enslaved to the bondholders. That's who we're owned by.
Yes. So, for generations to come. We're more in. So that's what Westphalia really was. It was a slaver system. It was a unaccountable slaver system where you were owned. And I mean, now it's to such a degree of slavery. It's not just tax, wage, and debt slavery. Now it's right down to our cells are enslaved to pharmaceuticals, or our attention networks are enslaved to social media, right? They've been able to get right down, and I know we hate to say the name, but the Nazis did an extraordinary job, medical research and all this kind of stuff in the 30s and 40s. They've now enslaved the hundreds of trillions of cells in our body, and they make vast fortunes off of that. Mm-hmm. It's a slave system so total and absolute, no monarch or prince could have ever thought of it. No dictator could have ever thought of that. Mm-hmm. And I agree, it's come to an end because there is no more future to borrow against.
Right. That's the key. That's the key. Once you reach debt saturation, you have to reset the system.
You have to. You have to. Now the question is,
and to Stevenson's credit as a writer, he understood that. He wrote the end of the story first, Cryptonomicon. Then he went back and filled in the history, and he saw it. Then it's too bad that Neil's gone like off the fucking loony deep end and turned into like a carbon copy Seattle leftist. Like, oh my freaking God, what happened to that guy? But those first 6 or 7 books that he wrote were unbelievable.
Yeah,
they were very, very hit, and they were very much on it. Snow Crash, those guys, the Diamond
Anathema,
Age.
Anathema,
Anathem. I didn't read. My wife read Anathem. I didn't read it.
It's brilliant.
But once he got to Fall, the sequel to Reamdy, where he's like, we're all going to upload our consciousness into now. I'm like, no, we're now it's a godless universe. Now he's gone to like complete godless friggin' transhumanist. I'm like, I'm not interested in anymore. Like you were fine when you were updating Philip K. Dick. You are not fine anymore. This is very important. It's a very important divide, and Neil Stephenson pretty much stop after. I would say the Baroque cycle. I haven't read Anathems. I can't.
I think that's the last one I read, and I haven't read any of his stuff after. Yeah,
just squeeze all the words in, and then squeeze out the distilled juice from the sponge. To Brexit from 1680 is to move away from cheap, foreign, essentially slave labor without being explicitly called slave labor. It's you have a job. It's the same. It's we just change the names. We don't
tax, wage, and debt slavery.
You're a slave.
It's tax, wage, and debt slavery.
You come to do cheap labor. It's not exactly the feudal system, but it kind of is. And then you have the central banks, and all the money kind of floats up, and then they can do seemingly ethereal things with this money. That's all work put on the back of people working for shit, and I kind of, I don't know, early like textile revolution. To the United States, you're saying that right now is what's happening is a breaking away from that internally, and I would imagine externally. By externally, you would say, well, we're not going to use slave labor in Vietnam to build Nikes anymore. Internally, you're saying you're going to have factories so that people can have a job and have a living, which is what most people want. To the leftist people that are saying, oh, Americans don't want to work in factories. A lot of people just fucking, the vast majority of people I know, just they They just want a 9 to 5. They just want to be able to provide for their family. So
That's right.
is that kind of what the Brexit from 1680 is? Is that system breaking away from that in general, Tom?
And getting back to owning your labor.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You
The
have to get back to
ability,
owning your labor.
yes,
You have
yes.
to get back to owning your labor. And the only way you can do that is to have money that has no counterparty, that
Well,
has no counterparty risk.
it's also like all those fucking retards that are like, yeah, building microwaves in America. Oh yeah, that's how all the great wars are won. And it's like, what do you think the fucking manufacturing base of World War II was? Where do you pivot? You no, you don't need microwaves, but it's the same shit.
Well, the
It's
microwave
still
came out of radar
but
and
I know,
radar
but
studies
it's
and
even
research.
it's just anything.
Uh,
It's like, oh, you used
Right.
to make shoelaces, now you're gonna be making parachutes for airborne soldiers. Oh, you made cars, can you make the walls a little thicker? Now it's a tank. It's like that's where it comes from. So on like a much deeper level, it's like this is also like truly a national security thing in terms of
so the fundamental the fundamental principle of English civilization in refutation to continental is individual sovereignty and the right to private property. Those are the two fundamentals of our civilization. We don't have either one of those right now. And I think Tom's,
no,
yeah,
his Starlink it does.
gotcha. So if you are taxed out of your mind, if you are indebted out of your mind, do you have private property?
No, it's again, it's the carefully and impressively constructed facade that you're not a
A
slave,
facade.
but you're a slave.
If you can't speak the truth as you know it, do you have individual sovereignty and act upon that? Do you have individual sovereignty?
No, and I know that because whenever you see someone in the UK be like, America thinks they have all the freedoms, we're just as free too. We just don't have school shootings. I just always reply with the same copy pasted. I said, tweet out right now that you think it's wrong when illegals rape or immigrants rape children. You won't because you'll go to jail. You're not free.
No, you're not
So
free. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
yeah.
My back?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Okay.
good.
I guess I had a quick power glitch. Thankfully, like
No, you're
I
good.
didn't, I just okay.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
Um,
But that's
no. If you, I always look at it. I came at it from like really hardcore libertarian theory. Not that I hold to that in practical sense today, but I always used to argue with Marxists. I'm like, okay, so, dude, at the end of the day, who owns you?
Yeah.
Do you own yourself?
Yeah.
If you don't own yourself, then who does?
yeah.
Yes.
And their
Yeah.
only answer when they know they're trapped is they say, "I'm uncomfortable with this concept of ownership." I'm like, "Fuck off." Like,
Yeah, exactly.
when I had like very good friends, Marxist friends, argue that with me, and we get to that point, I threw them out of my house.
That's not
Yeah.
that's not
It's
enough.
really simple.
That's
Yeah.
not
You don't
true.
want to accept the fact that you have a property right in your own person.
So
It's that simple. And if you don't accept that, now you have a choice as to what boundaries you want to put around that.
Yeah.
That's your choice. You want to give up some of
Yeah.
that? That's your
Yeah.
choice. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you have the ultimate right to say no,
yes.
period. Shall I pull out my copy of V for Vendetta? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's that scene when she's in jail and she's writing, and she's
Yeah,
reading the thing about the inch, and she's reading about the woman. Oh my God, I'm writing my life story on toilet paper, right? That moment. That's what we're talking about here. And
Oh.
you always have the right to say, I'm ready to die to say no.
So this is
If
what
you're not willing to
makes,
do that, you're not free.
this is what makes English civilization so different than any other civilization that's been, except for maybe Russian to some degree, although they have their own unique ways. Our princes went to war over this to make sure that we had this capability for more than 1,000 years with the king and with other princes and with continentals. Right? That's what the Magna Carta was. It was a codification of the limitation of the king's power.
Right.
To remove, what was that fight over? Private property and individual sovereignty. For more than 1,000 years, 1,500 years, an Englishman's king is his castle. That was meant. That wasn't just some, we paper over that now as well. A Englishman's debt is his castle now. I think's how we'd interpret it. But these things are
Right.
deeply woven into our civilization. And we fought this out amongst ourselves with kings and barons and bad princes and foreigners for more than 1,000 years. We need to get back to that. And we need to remember that when we have a sufficient enough enemy, inside or external, we get over our petty family feuds. Right? For us Scottish, we get over the fact that our tartans are different colors.
Mm-hmm.
We get over the fact that you Irish
exactly.
speak a different form of Gaelic than we do, right? Or that those long shake fuckers down there south of the border in England, right? We get over that and we're like, okay, yeah, no, fuck you, motherfuckers. And we'll get back to fighting later. We can get back to petty squabbles and fights, and some are pretty serious. We'll get back to that later, right? But what's at the core of it?
We'll get back to that later.
Individual sovereignty, this is private property. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Tom. Yeah.
And that spirit still exists here in the United States in certain enclaves. Like you still have that deeply embedded here. And in some ways, what was really fascinating when I stopped to think about how that was turned against us many ways to foment the Civil War.
Yes.
Right. That impulse of redneck, of quote unquote redneck in Appalachia and Scott. And remember, let's back up. Who won the Revolutionary War? It wasn't the North. It wasn't Washington's army. It was the swamp fox, and it was those guys in the South fighting a guerrilla war that won the fucking war. Like at the end of the day, like
well, let's look
those guys won the war, and then they worked really hard to. So I was just going to say,
what about Sherman and the Civil War?
Yeah. Well, exactly, and then he goes and he sows the ground with fucking salt in order to make sure the South never rises again. Why? Yeah. And so, what was done to set us against each other is we're still dealing with it today. It's just terrible. And I'm an immigrant, right? I'm only second generation Italian. So I see it from a slightly different perspective. I don't have that visceral thing. My wife is Appalachian, actually. And from Ohio, and so I see it somewhat there, but not to any extent. What I see there is just the after effects of it. How poor these freaking people are in Southern Ohio, West Virginia, Northern Kentucky, like that area of the world. It's like that area of the country is one of the poorest areas of the entire country. It has been for a long, long time, and continues to be, and will probably continue to be into the future. So now the question is, how do we overcome that? Because we're still fighting the same freaking war today, and it's still being played out within the United States, and that division is being used to try and break the United States up.
Yes.
And it's the same, fuckers that have been doing it to us forever and a day. So now the question is, can we overcome that? Trump, to his credit, understands that this is the problem. I think he does understand this, and he's in a very different position.
I fundamentally agree.
I think he's. Go ahead. I know my connection might still be. I'm still getting aftershocks of this.
All good, Tom. All good.
So, what were you saying, Ian?
Well, this is why there does come times when we have to set aside our long-standing differences and remember who we are and where the fuck we come from and what our ancestors went through so that we could even be standing here today to be in this fight.
Do you think that, you could almost argue that that's a kind of a bigger picture thing right now is like,
yes.
If you took all these disparate pieces and plug them together, what do you zip up?
You have the English.
Okay. Well, no, zip up the borders. Okay. USAID, stop the flow of shit out, and then it's reshoring jobs, bring that shit back in. What does it really do? Man, that lowers a lot of tensions when a lot less people are on the brink of not being able to pay or not being able to have a job, or a lot less people dropping dead of fentanyl. Well, why are they doing fentanyl? Well, because they're fucked and the factory got hollowed out and sent to China in the 90s.
Yeah.
In a sense, that's a bulwark against, it's like they say, a nuclear family is a bulwark against tyranny because you have that happy home where you rely on one another. It's kind of a bulwark against external forces fomenting civil war within is it's a lot harder to get it. It's easy in 2020 when there's a fever pitch and a static in the air. It's a lot harder when most people are just like you don't get involved in stupid shit if you have like a solid job with benefits. You really don't. You might get
So,
too drunk on a weekend, but for the most part, you're not putting on an Antifa mask and throwing a brick through a Cybertruck. If you're like, yeah,
well, if you are, you're getting chased down the street and get
You're
your
not.
ass
And
handed
notice
to
you're not
you.
throwing bricks. They're throwing.
Yeah,
They're
whatever
throwing Molotov cocktails. That's a signal.
yeah,
No, the Molotov cocktail is an absolute signal. Very
yes,
Okay.
important.
Well,
yeah.
still,
Well,
point being reinforced. This is a way to
Mhm.
here's
bulwark
here's
against it. Yeah.
here's the problem we have though with that. So totally agree with you, but there's a problem with it, which is an a priori assumption that's not true. Okay. And I saw this in special forces when I went and did that for my midlife crisis in my 40s. Um, we kept going into these parts of the world, and if we just built out infrastructure and economics, these people were all going to get along
Yeah.
and it was all going to work out. And we dumped fuck tons of money into these places and all this knowledge and expertise. No.
No.
What it turns
Nation building
out
is
is,
fucked.
yeah, well, it turns out what you do is you have to give them a shared, you have to help them reconnect with their last shared identity. You help them do that. And then you bring some of the other additional, they'll figure that stuff out. It's
Right.
astounding. Communities don't need vast sums of money and all this other stuff and all this, white guy knowledge. And it's not just white guys now, but, white guy school knowledge. They don't need that. What they need is a sense of purpose. They need the commons restored to them. And one of the commons that is the most fundamental is your identity. And we find this with guys with brain injuries. We're getting them, myself included, when I was dealing with my own. We could do all the physical brain injury recovery. We can do all the sophisticated medical stuff. But if a guy doesn't rebuild his identity stack with who he is now after the injuries and how that's all changed from who he was before, nothing will work. And out at 3 to 5 years out down the road, well, with no sign, he'll just kill himself out of nowhere. Why?
Mhm.
Because turns out we're not the economy. We're not our job. We're not these things. We're an identity. We're a people first. And so we've got to reconnect with that, or none of the efforts the oligarchs and princes are doing are going to work because all the divides, all the things that keep us apart are they're still going to be there.
Let me clarify. You're correct in that it is an incorrect assumption. We saw that with nation building. We saw that with, well, if we let China
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
democratic world, no, they won't. I get all that. I should clarify. We've already seen it work in the US. So it's more of a, it's not the let's go to Sierra Leone and give them elementary schools. Like, I don't know if that's going to work. I guess my point is like, we already saw it work here. It's like, let's go back to that. It
Well,
has worked before. We have had you're always going to have problems, but we have
yeah.
had like a unified America, 4th of July, NASCAR, fucking monster trucks. No, that is a flawed assumption. It's like we're gonna go to Iraq and we're gonna build the target. Like, yeah, that no, they're gonna burn it and fucking rape people in it. Here, it might work because it has worked before. Don't
No,
think so?
because we have all of it now. If
Okay.
we really, we have all the wealth,
Yeah.
we have all of it here now. The problem we have is we don't have an identity anymore. We've allowed them to fracture that, and we've allowed, like the thing I hear the most that drives me nuts is how much we hate the British. It's like, motherfucker, we are British. We're Americans. We've distinctly unique, but we're no different from the British than the Irish were, or the Scots were, or the Welsh were. That's where our civilization comes from.
But then how do you restore? So you're saying like it can't be done because we have the problems and we already have the jobs and it's fucked. Well, then how can it even be
Remember,
done?
stop hating our parents, as fucked up as they might have become. They're under duress too, right? But remember who we are. Remember that we've got over 1,000 years of going through these fights. Go back to that history, look at it, figure out how
Mhm.
how have we been torn apart before and how did we come back together?
I'm looking at like, well, how does that get done here? Does Trump do an emergency broadcast system and say like, "Hey, remember who you?" That's what I'm
I think
getting
it's
at. It's like,
happening. I
how
think he's
does
Oh no,
trying
no,
to
I
do
know.
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right,
Yeah, go
thank you,
ahead.
Tom.
I
Go ahead.
think I no, Ian, you're absolutely on there. I'm this is one of the things that I've noted about what Trump I think is trying to do.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to
Yes.
I
Yes.
think he's trying to liberate everybody. He's trying to liberate Americans and Canadians. That false
Yeah.
divide between Americans and
Yeah.
Canadians.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all bullshit. Like
Yeah.
Canada was effectively populated. The Laurentian elites are just the
Yeah.
Tories who got
Yeah.
their asses kicked, and they ran up to
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ontario, took the place over, and then set up anti-USA the same way that they set up, anti. It's the same. It's the same
Yeah. Same fight. Yeah.
problem. Now you can trace back. You have to liberate Canada. You've got to liberate the entire Commonwealth,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
after that, you have to also liberate the individual countries of Europe
Yeah.
to get back to who they are, because no, the Italians have to reclaim Italy
Yes. Yes. Yes.
for
Yes.
Italians. The French
Yes.
have to. That's what I
Yes.
mean by that. I don't
Yeah.
mean
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that we
Not
become
us.
one big. No.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
No, not us. It's different. It's
Yeah.
a different world. I agree.
Totally agree with you.
And
Totally agree with you.
what I mean is that we have to get rid of this oligarchic mindset, this transnational oligarchic mindset that there should be big blocks of people.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this is a fucking
And then
lie.
we're all
And
interchangeable.
we don't have shared Western values.
No.
That's a phrase you
No.
get pissed off when we hate the British. I get pissed off with shared Western values. I get pissed off
agree.
with Judeo-Christian tradition. There is no Judeo-Christian tradition. They
Yeah.
created that shit in the 1950s.
Yeah. 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 I'm with you.
Like bullshit.
Totally with you.
Like that's
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you.
It's Italy,
Yeah.
Italy for Italians, Hungary for Hungarians.
Yeah.
If the French want to be French, I don't know why, but let them be French. Same thing with the Germans. Fuck them. I don't give a shit. Just leave me out of it.
Yeah. I'm
And
totally with you.
my family came over here a century ago to escape nascent Italian fascism and what was happening in Italy at the time, aughts through the teens. My father was the youngest of 11. They spoke English in the household. My grandparents were dead by the time they were in their early 60s. I never met them. By the time my dad had kids as the youngest of 11, they were both dead, right? His brothers all fought in World War II. And they all died in their 50s. They all died of effectively the after effects of PTSD and were fighting in the war. Three or four of them, we don't have replacement children within my family. And these people came over and then fought and then went and fought for America, for the idea of America, for the idea of that was exactly what you're talking about. And they were sold that, and then the family was effectively destroyed. My family is going to be dead. My lineage will be gone in 2 generations. Okay, only one of my father's children has had replacement levels of kids in the grandchildren. Like his grandson Mike, my nephew Mike has had 3 kids. No one else has had more than 1 or 2. I've only had 1.
Shut up, Mike.
Okay. So what I mean by this is this is real. Like the attrition rate on my family is insane. And but they did so to fight for these ideas.
Correct.
Italians.
Yes.
First generation fucking Italians.
Yes.
The kids barely born in the United States.
Dude, there's a
Growing
bunch
up in
of
Brooklyn.
Irish. My dad
Yeah,
tracked it down. There's a bunch of Irish Carrigans that came over and immediately started fighting in the Civil War. Like immediately.
Oh, that was a big thing. We
Yeah,
lost
I know, but that's my point. Is like that is a thing. Is like you come over.
750,000 real dead, and half of them were Irish.
Yeah, that's what I mean though. It's like so that is the thing. In general, the whole idea of the removing the I don't what I just always visualize things in different ways. But kind of when Tom you're saying that all these countries, I just think of like if you ever take like an ice tray and submerge it in water versus when you slowly bring it out and there's all the separate things and that's kind of what it is. You can't have this big amalgam of just dog shit, oligarchical one world. No, you do have to have all these independent things, not only for your like you're saying, Ian, you do have to have an identity in your cultures and your holidays and that's like the sweet part of life. And then it's also like it's also good to have all these competitive separate economies as opposed to, well, Vietnam's willing to do it for a hundredth of a penny, but fucking Nigeria is going to do it for a thousandth of a penny. Like that is a race
To the bottom,
to a real just
to
like inner
nothing.
circle of hell, kind of
Yeah.
just dog shit.
Absolutely.
So here's another thing about, so Tom, to your point about your Italian family, right? One of the
Mhm.
things that's unique about English civilization is that it was multiracial from the very beginning. It was Alfred the
Right.
Great trying to figure out how do we get Danes and Frisians and Anglos and Saxons and Celts and Gales and Britannies and Welsh and East Anglians. How do we get and the Irish and all of their how do we get all of these peoples on these islands to work together as a whole? And he took pieces from each, a lot of it from the Danelaw, because they were fairly good at some of these things. And so from its very beginning, the English civilization, unlike most others that are very ethno-based, like the Germans and the French and others, from its very beginning, it's if you adhere to and earn the right of individual sovereignty and believe in private property and are willing to fight for that for yourself and others, you could be an Englishman,
Yep. Yep.
right? And
Yep.
America is the greater, excuse me, the more sophisticated, broader distillation of that,
Hmm. Yes.
right? We just
Yep.
expanded upon that. But if you adhere to those two things and you're willing to stand for it, for you, fight for it, for you and others, you can be an American,
Hmm.
right? You can be English, you can be an American, you can be a member of the English civilization.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, and I'm not flashing back um, to my social studies in high school. I grew up in New York, so one full year of social studies is we study the Iroquois
Mm, mm,
in New York State, because the Iroquois, the 5 or 7 tribes of the Iroquois in New York State, like there's a story. That story is very reminiscent of what you just told. Like
yeah,
all these warring tribes that eventually
yeah.
came together,
As a confederation.
and
Yeah,
the and our and our our founding fathers, for Jefferson, they were very, very much
yeah,
influenced by those
yes,
people. And when you really study Native American cultures, you'll realize they're fiercely fucking individualistic and fiercely protective of private property
yeah,
rights,
yeah,
to
yeah.
the point I've had discussions with libertarians talking about shit on Vancouver Island and other enclaves where like these people are so enlightened in that respect that they don't write property, they don't write deeds down in they don't have lawyers to write deeds. They just have like property cards and people's names written on who owns what land in pencil, because why change the 3x5 card? Just this scratch one guy's name
Because
out and write
it's,
the next guy in, because they all trust each other, because it's a high trust,
yeah.
because they're getting about very
Well,
high
because
trust society.
and
And
because
but
private
still,
property is inviolable. It's the one
bingo.
inviolable. This is what's at the heart of English society and civilization, and we've got to remember it. And we've been financialized since the
I agree. I
1600s,
agree completely.
right? So when I
Yes.
say,
And
English civilization, I don't mean the English themselves, right? I don't mean Britons, but our civilization goes back 1300 years, right? Component pieces
mm,
before that. We've
yeah,
been through all
no,
these things before, right? And if you look at the empires that have existed, the British Empire has done more for the world than all other empires. It's built out schools and roads and education and industry. And it did. Now, did it steadily get corrupted and co-opted at the top? Yep, because we've been occupied by
yep,
continentals.
yep.
And because those continentals realized the same thing that Tom, you talk about in immense detail, and I'm very respectful of the work you do. It's the
Mm,
same thing they've been trying to do, not been trying, but they've been doing with the United States since the 1940s
mm-hmm.
through the
And
Eurodollar
then
system
yeah,
and
and
all
then the
the
question
aid.
now is, yeah, and now the question is, who set up that system? To me, it was always, it became very obvious that there was something seriously wrong at the top of London. Like, and I don't know who's, I don't know where that tracks from there. I don't know that history. I'm perfectly willing to be educated about the prehistory of that era. But I look at all of this and I say, just simply put, like, whoever was angry at us losing, at losing to us in the Revolutionary War, be it the British or the fake British that ran the empire at that point, I don't give a shit. It doesn't matter. What matters is they want their colonies back.
Yeah, well, I don't think,
and they're still butthurt about it.
I don't think that. Well, and it's again, I think it's the Continentals through their control of the city of London, which was the Dutch East Indies Company, basically, for all intents and purposes. William of Orange, etc., and his traitor Stuart wife. To them, there wasn't a victory of the colonials over the British in there wasn't a revolution. That's a PR gimmick. To them, it was, we're fighting the Spanish Empire and the French Empire at the same time. We can't afford this little, Tommy used the word last time we talked, kerfluffle over there. Let's give them the illusion of self-rule. We've done that before. We'll give them the illusion of self-rule, but we'll control them through the financial and the banking system. And we'll just steadily enslave them, where more and more of the fruits of their labor in the form of debt and debt obligations and in, did colonialism end? No, it just rebranded and repurposed itself. What is it? It's the banks. Well, all of this aid money, we're looking at USAID, et cetera, but look at the $1 trillion a year and trillions of dollars Americans have paid out, quite aside from the military and military assistance, which is another whole thing. Right. But all of that aid money that goes to these countries goes into the banks of their former colonial masters, which then flows back to Europe and is the liquidity that keeps Europe going. So they don't consider the Americans to have, won a revolution. The Americans enslaved themselves. And now, as you've articulated very well, Tom, the American oligarchs and princes have had enough, and they got SOFR in place, and they'd had enough in the 1950s and 60s, right? And so they killed the president, scared all the oligarch families back into line. So it's taken, I think, 60 years for the oligarchs in the United States and some equivalents in the UK, actual nobles, to be prepared to take on this occupation so that we can finally have a real Brexit. But it's not the one from 2019 or 16 or whenever it is. It's the 1688 Brexit.
Right. Yeah, no, that's in effect been my read on this as well. I didn't take it all the way back to that, connected all the way there. I looked at it from, and I didn't just look at it from. I've been mostly looking at it from a. It's funny you say all this. In recent times, in the last year or so, I did an article for the newsletter where I traced some building on some work from Richard Poe about the trade deficit that the United States had with Europe. Specifically, he was looking at, of course, the trade deficit we had, the trade periods of trade deficit and surplus that we had in the United States. Right? Like, to your point, is what I'm getting at, which is that after the Cornwallis surrenders at Yorktown, continental Europe still controls the American financial system because we're just the purveyor of raw materials. The factories are all over in Europe. All we can, we can't build a durable system. And they knew from the beginning that they had to stop. They had to ensure we never built out our own industrial base, because if we did, then we would no longer need them. And so that came to a head right around the quote unquote Civil War, what we like to call down here the recent unpleasantness. And once you get to there, from that period, from Reconstruction forward up until Bretton Woods, we run a trade surplus with Europe, not a trade deficit. And that's what built the American empire. That's what built the America that we all kind of, not line on, right?
But it's also built out with their banking money. Yeah, go ahead.
Agreed. Yeah. And then, starting with the Panic of 1907, and then World War I, and then the Dawes bonds, and us, lending all the money to fight World War One and everything else, we wound up enslaving ourselves, really enslaving ourselves at the banking
Yes.
level back to
Yes.
the system overseas.
Yeah.
Interesting. You're. I'm going now that we've established all this, right? Now I have a question for you. What's your view of Churchill?
I think Churchill was an asshole.
Because I think Churchill's the pivotal figure here.
I think he's an asshole.
Well, I agree.
I think he's a great man. I don't
I
want
think
to.
he was actually. Okay.
I think
Okay.
Churchill.
So I'm interested because I have a very negative view of Churchill at this point because of how he sold, in effect, the whole system. Again, it's hard to. This is a perspective I've never entertained before. So I'm doing this live, guys.
Yeah.
I'm not passing judgment here. I'm trying to integrate what I think I know with what I'm now being presented with, and trying to come up with something different, a different model in my head. But go ahead.
Churchill was not the architect of it, and forgive me, I'm horrible with names. There were some others that were the architect. They went back. He was on the outs at the time. There were some bankers here in the U.S. and some continental bankers and the City of London bankers, and they said this is how we can re-enslave the colonials to financially sustain and more militarily sustain the empire that we can't sustain anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And Roosevelt played a huge part in that. All of that effort,
Yes,
really the infrastructure, everything was being put in place in the 1930s through Wall Street,
well,
right?
I'm actually speaking now when Churchill was Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah.
And when he was, I'm thinking about the period from World War II, World War One to 1925.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that period.
Okay, well, that's okay.
Period.
So great, because what was happening during that time is this enslavement of the Americans, infrastructure was all being put in place with the participation of our own people. People,
Yes.
The Dulles guys and their predecessors and all of that. World War II was a way to just lock it in place, sink it all in, lock it all into place.
Mm-hmm. Because
And
from our perspective, we have the Revolution of 1913, creation of the Federal Reserve, 16th and 17th Amendments, right, which destroyed the structure of the country.
Income tax,
income tax that now the states could no longer advocate for themselves. But I think it starts with the Panic of 1907 in many ways, because we had to create a moment in time where we had to have some kind of lender of last resort for the nascent commercial paper market, because we were now creating something that the world hadn't seen before, which was commercial paper, not government paper. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in many ways, I mean, that was the big thing at that moment. And so I'm trying to, because Churchill had a choice in 1920 or 1923, putting the pound back to its original conversion rate to gold pre-war is what set the stage for World War II.
I don't think Churchill had a choice.
And
I think
that's a good question. That's maybe an open question.
The empire, the British Empire. So again, because the colonial banks and the colonial system had siphoning so much of the economic activity and capabilities of the British Empire for so long, that by the late 1800s, the British Empire was bankrupt, irrecoverably so. And to such a point that, how many of the Gilded Age daughters and sons went and married back into the British aristocracy and plus them back up financially. Look at the Astors and others. So by the late 1800s, the siphoning of the productivity of the British Empire, so much of that had gone over to the continental banks through the City of London that the British Empire was beyond bankrupt. So I don't believe Churchill really had a choice. Does it make him a good guy? Oh, hell no. But I don't think he had a choice. Where I really am unhappy, and who the hell am I, but is that we had our own bankers, our own industrialists, our own parliamentarian people here that helped put the infrastructure in place that would enslave us to continental Europe through the city of London till this very day.
Right. And you know, and this is this has been the big the the big problem in many ways. I'm thinking now about like you know, it's funny. Like the Dawes bonds are a very, very interesting moment. I don't know if you know anything about
I
this
don't.
stuff, right?
I don't.
The
Yeah,
Americans attempt. Okay, so Charles Dawes was the vice president of the United States in 2020, and it's like 20 in 1924,
yeah.
right? So post German hyperinflation, the Germans are hyperinflated because they had to pay back their Treaty
Yeah.
of Versailles debt
Yeah.
with in gold. So they hyperinflated to get gold in order to pay the Versailles debt, and then what the Americans put in place, what Dawes argued for and got done, was to create these Dawes bonds, which were effectively a circle jerk, where Americans American banks paid back. They lent the money to Germany. Germany then paid back the British and the French, who paid us back. But it was all basically the same pile of money. But at some point, Churchill made the decision to, and everything was fine had they revalued the pound at its current actual market value as opposed to the pre-war value. And what he did was he went back to the original. He tied it to the went back on the gold standard. The Britain went back on the gold standard to the same $20.67 an ounce equivalent pre-war, which then of course created a massive deflationary impulse and made it almost impossible now for Germany to ever. Someone still wanted their pound of flesh is the point I'm trying to make here. Yeah. And they still wanted the same number of ounces of gold. They weren't going to get it through effectively a financial circle jerk. Dawes wins the friggin' Nobel Peace Prize in 20 in order to stop all of this. And these Dawes bonds are in place all the way and through until paying back until the 1930s. And Hitler complained viciously about all of this stuff because it was set up a treadmill that Germany could never pay back its obligations. In effect, France and or Britain and or whoever who actually forced this horrible peace, and the Treaty of Versailles is clearly the unjust peace, right, of our age. Hitler wanted that. Well, he knew he could never pay that back, and no matter what he did. And at some point, he finally said, "Look, I've paid enough." And he repudiated the rest of the balance of the Dawes bonds in the early 1930s. And that's actually what caused the banking crisis in the United States of 1932 and 1933. And they did it in early 2033, and I think it's 33. And that's why Roosevelt had to close the banks and revalue gold to $35 an ounce. Mm-hmm. Because it caused a complete blow up, because this whole system had been running in order to try and get Germany out from underneath it. But because Churchill revalued the pound at the pre-war rate, it was never going to pay anything back. And the way I mostly understand this, so this is, and I think that was your inciting incident. I'll be honest with you, that's your inciting incident for World War II at that point. But that was a moment of independence from the Dutch, French, British, continental city of London thing that you're talking about. That was, look, I'm declaring independence. And so then he went from everybody's friend to now we have to kill him. And because he started the process of moving Germany out from underneath that system, if I understand correctly. I am not trying to rewrite history relative to Hitler.
Okay. I have a different
okay, that's
thought.
fine. I'm happy to hear your take of it. That's kind of the take I've gotten to this point. I don't know that I'm correct.
Well, I think you're absolutely right on the mechanics. Absolutely right. I don't, as to why did Churchill do what he did and why did things play out the way they did, I can't help but think that the whole Hitler Nazi thing was created specifically to bring about exactly what it did, was reindustrialization through slave labor by, killing off creating disgust responses using the Marxist. The point being is that I believe that by when the tally for the cost of World War I was finally looked at across Europe, across the United Kingdom, right? The British Empire, that cost was so vast that no amount of financial machinations was gonna address it. And
Right.
so it was committed at that point. The only way in which we can do this, because we can't drop energy costs to zero. They didn't
Right.
have nuclear capabilities, et cetera, at the time. And, they didn't have the climate change green stuff at the time, which hasn't worked. But point being, that, the only way that they were going to be able to pay this amount of debt from the industrial scale slaughter and expenditures of World War I was exactly what they did. The only way they're going to replus up the banks and the financial system, recollateralize, right? Uh, not re-liquefy, but have the liquidity necessary to expand and destroy enough things so that you spend 30 years rebuilding and et cetera, was to do exactly what they did. And just like we spent 20 years or 10 years forcing the Russians into a position where they had to move into the Ukraine, we did the very same with the Germans. Because
I agreed.
if you look
Agreed. No, agreed completely.
at and again, I keep coming back to Dulles Brothers because they're right in the center of it. Was it Alan Dulles? Was a banker for the Nazis.
So was Poppy Bush.
Same with Poppy Bush, right? So if you have bankrupted three empires,
You
the
didn't know that,
Ottomans,
Tommy?
No, no, I know,
Like,
I know all
really?
this. I just always laugh at I always but E.H. Harriman, Brown Brothers, all
Yeah.
that shit. No, I
all
know
of
it.
them.
I
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
can't help but laugh when it's like when what was it? Gary Webb, George Marshall was found dead. The guy that blew the whistle on the cocaine, and they found in his trunk on a piece of paper, Poppy Bush's personal. Sometimes I just chuckle.
Okay, so just so you guys know, I grew up in Highland Mills, New York, which is just down the road from Herman, New York.
Mm,
The town named after
yeah.
Harriman.
E.H.
Okay,
Harriman, Brown
Yeah.
Brothers,
that's his
Harriman.
place. That's his
Yeah.
center. It was center of power, for fuck's sake. My sisters got their AA from Harriman Community College. Like, dude, it's like literally
It's
right
just
down the
a
fucking
it's a
road from
just
my
a
high
big
school.
hoot. I just there's nothing else to do but it's so I just look back and you just see like how evil all of the incestuous strings are. You can't help but chuckle. Doesn't make it right.
Well, you have to, right? It's called macabre humor,
Yeah.
right? You gotta laugh at. Here's and I appreciate the
It's
conversation
all
one
Dr.
here.
Strangelove, folks. Like
Yeah.
every day,
Yeah, yeah,
all day,
really.
every
Yeah.
day. It's all Dr.
Yeah.
Strangelove.
Yeah.
So I remember, Tom, maybe a year or two ago, I sent you a message about um, Marxists versus Nazis, and you had articulated
Right.
that you didn't really see a distinction, and it didn't really matter. I think and maybe at the time it didn't, right? Because we were dealing, but this is my genuine concern because the same pattern 100 years later, or almost exactly 100 years later, is playing out again the same.
Mhm.
And to your credit, the vice president and some others, there were ways that they try to use the financial machine, the financial system to fix the problem. But there were
Yes.
other factions that didn't want to fix the problem that way and didn't want to allow that. And they wanted the eugenicist, slaughter, slave labor, um, theft of assets, less than 1/10 of 1% of ever which were ever restored. And they wanted to kill all the undesirables. And they wanted to draw the Germans into a position where the Germans would be killing themselves over how evil they had been for generations to come.
Mm-hmm.
And we're
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
the same thing now as the current, everybody looks at Trump like Trump's this genius. And Trump's a brilliant guy. He's a great guy, but it's the other people around, the power around that made sure he got into office this time, quite all the obstacles that are the ones that have right, they have all the
Agreed
plans and
completely.
strategies, and they're trying everything they can. Those other factions that denied that possibility in the 1920s, that led into the 1930s, and then into World War II and everything after, those factions are still here. and they're still very powerful, and they still want to do the same solution. And
Yes, they are.
right.
I agreed completely. When if I remember correctly, my general rule, Ian, and it replied to you a year ago with a flip answer about fascism versus versus communism. I'm of the opinion at this point, just to make it, I'm like Trump. I'm like, I just want to make it really freaking simple. They're all fucking commies. Like, and I mean that in that if you're not if you don't really aren't an individualist at the end of the day, if you don't believe in individual sovereignty and you don't believe in English, in fact, in your terms, English society, then you're a fucking commie. And I just need to, we need to get rid of
Marxist or Marxist.
We have two generations of Americans and English who just, well, at the end of the day, they just want to believe that well, no, we never. Communism sounds great in theory. No, it doesn't. Fuck you. Like, no, absolutely not. It's terrible in every way. No, they're just commies everywhere. So, and I firmly believe that kind of common turn never ended. But I also understand the idea that did they create communism as a false boogeyman?
Yeah.
Oh,
it was a real boogeyman.
Then we get into Richard Poe and whether Marx was an MI6 asset and all this other shit, and who did Lenin really work for? And like World War One broke down the Russian Empire, took down the Ottomans. Right?
So
like, think about
it. The Germans sent somebody to go talk to the Ottoman people, the Ottoman peoples about jihad. The Germans funded Lenin and Trotsky to go to Russia, put them on a train, and sent them there with security and funding, $40 million. So, and who set those folks up to do that? So, point I'm getting at is this, though. While I agree with you, and I call them resentfuls in the book I wrote, The Eternal War, there are two factions. One's the Marxist faction, and the other one's the Nazi faction. Down underneath, they're both socialists. They want the same end. They just go about it in two fundamentally different ways, and we need to be careful because the Nazis are way more sophisticated, way more clever, way more ludicrously devious, and they will burn and murder and slaughter anybody. And if you were in this, because the debt that we had gotten into in the late 1800s, early 1900s with World War I pales in comparison to the debts that we now collectively have. And if you were going to do what you did to Europe to re-collateralize and build your liquidity and have enough destruction so that you can rebuild for the next 30 years, there's only one country in the world that you would do that to, and it ain't Russia.
It's the United States.
It's right here. We're the only ones with that kind of wealth and assets and right
and know-how and all the rest of it. Yeah, no, agreed completely. And so for me, it was very obvious at one point. I just looked at this whole thing. I'm like, this is just the Europeans trying to get Russia and the United States into another freaking war. That's it.
It's also a deflection. It's also a distraction. It's a deflection.
Yeah, it's a distraction.
Because the only way we beat these forces internally, externally, and so the only thing that makes sense once we get through this, whatever the hell it's going to be, is a Russia-China-US alliance.
Yes.
It's the only thing that makes sense. It's the only way to keep all these fuckers from, right?
Yeah, no, it's the only way to keep them from rising from the grave. You have to kill them.
Absolutely.
So,
and to your point, if I might, one piece there.
And this is what.
Yeah.
Sure. No, go right ahead.
No. To something you're saying. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but you're absolutely right. The two things that we have to throw off is this whole concept of Western civilization, and that we're Europeans. That the English are Europeans. Fuck both of those. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yep. Yes. Fuck both those ideas.
Fuck them both.
No, you. If you want to make my point about fuck Europeans, you interrupt me every day of the week and twice on Sunday, dude. You go right ahead and do so. I'm okay with that. Please. Yeah, that's a winner every fucking time. I don't have to be the only guy standing on this fucking island. Okay, I'm with you. But no, it's true. It's true. We're not Europeans. We're the Europeans who left to become something better.
Yes.
And we have to be proud of that. And we have to realize that, every time Europe gets into trouble, they choose war.
Yes. Well, slavery and war.
And so now they're about to turn Europe into a big penal colony
Yep.
called the digital euro. They're going to
Yep.
bail in everybody. They're going to they won't even
Yep.
tell you what their fucking plans are. Yet they'll tell you what their plans
Yep.
are. Like, and so when I look at what Trump is now trying to do, and I was just chatting with my partner Dexter White about this very thing because he's brought up some very interesting things that are happening with Greece, and I looked at him and I said. And I said this in a market report for the patrons the other day. I said, everything in this world is fractal. Like, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, Russia is working in such a way as to create rump Ukraine with no access to the Black Sea. They're going to get Odessa by hook or crook eventually. In their time, in their space, they're going to get Odessa. And the Brits and the Europeans are going to be very big mad that they've lost access to the northern coast of the Black Sea, which is why they're trying to shore up with the biggest air base in NATO in Romania, which is why Kenan Georgescu cannot become president or not become the head of Romania.
Yeah.
The United States is shoring up Greece, moving assets out of Poland and Germany. Some of those are going to Greece. Some of them are coming home. Some of them are going to other places. Greece is becoming very important. Giorgia Meloni has survived the Italian deep state to this point with U.S. backing, and she is on her way to Washington to cut a bilateral trade agreement with the United States around the European Union in a direct thumb in the eye to Ursula fucking von der Leyen.
Yep.
Saying, we're Italy and we're going to negotiate a bilateral trade agreement. The last time that the EU tried to shake their people down for a whole bunch of money to send to Ukraine, it wasn't just the Hungarians who said no. It was the Hungarians, the Italians, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the Slovakians.
Yeah.
Now let's look at that situation. You add Greece to those countries that said no to more war in Ukraine, and all of a sudden you've got basically every country that matters on the Mediterranean, other than France, in alliance with what Trump wants. Now you have new NATO forming on the northern coast of the Mediterranean, and the only access that the EU has is the French Riviera. Am I still here? Did you lose me?
Yeah, I got you.
Did you get all?
Yeah, all I heard was other than France. Yeah, all I heard was
other than France. Other than France, and France, all the coast the French have is the French Riviera. Yeah. Which, if that was ever like industrial port material, it would have been. It's not. It's the French Riviera.
Yeah.
So, what do you see? The British still control Gibraltar. Spain wants to go populist. Portugal will do whatever Portugal wants to do. Italy is the linchpin in all of this. The Greeks have the best friggin' navy in the entirety of Europe. And Trump's really not all that upset with Erdogan moving into Syria.
No.
As a buffer state between Iran and Israel.
Yes.
And
with the largest army in NATO.
Right. And Erdogan just snuffed out a color revolution against him.
Yes.
So now all of a sudden there is no way. So of course, what do these fucking people do? They install Mark Carney into Canada because they need collateral somewhere. Yeah. And Canada's the last place they can get it.
That wasn't Europe that did that. That was Larry Fink.
Oh,
our problem is Our problem.
Okay, now explain that one. I want to hear that. That's an interesting. I hadn't heard that before. Expound on that, real.
Okay, so what was the whole? And you posted on this, I think this morning or last night, and I totally agree. What was the whole tariff thing? It was a probe, right? I'm an electrical engineer. I got a background in semiconductor electrical engineer. I got a problem with a board. What do? I don't send a current through it because I'm going to get reactance and capacitance and inductance, right? So I set a pulse, right, and then I see where it bleeds out, that it shouldn't be bleeding out. And then I trace down those leads. I work on those. And then I come at another oblique angle at another entry point, and I feed a pulse into there, and I see again, right? And then I work through. Right. Okay. That's exactly what the tariff thing was. Mm-hmm. Because, right? So I totally agree with you.
No, I'm laughing because I have a completely different way of looking at it. I'm a board game guy.
Yeah.
And so I sit down and I go, I've been at the gaming table playing games far more complicated than card games, far more complicated than poker. And I've gone, I got 4 people at the table. I'm trying to win. I'm like, I don't know where I am right now. I'm like, I look at the board. I know what deck he's playing. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And I make that move. And if the other 4 people at the table all groan,
Yes.
I know I've done exactly the right thing.
Yeah,
I've got
yeah,
a firing
yeah.
solution in my head.
Well,
and they just, same
I
thing.
don't play board games, but Sid Meier's Civilization, I cut my teeth on that,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Also a very good game for that kind of thing. Yes.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially if you put it up on the higher difficulty levels.
Yes.
But that's
Agreed.
what that is, right? It's,
Yep.
and our enemy, our most dangerous enemy is not in Europe, it's in Wall Street. And it's the
Yep.
financialist versus the banks.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
It is certain factions on Wall Street that I would
Correct.
consider quote unquote Davos banks.
Correct. Well,
as opposed to
they funded and built. Yeah, yeah, totally agree. It's the financialists versus the bankers.
And what's interesting is the day this is all. Yeah. And what's interesting, right, is that the same day that all this is happening, Jamie fucking Dimon, of all people, goes on Maria Barfiew, literally what blah blah blah. He's literally giving you the playbook.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, literally saying,
Yes.
my read on Dimon was absolutely fucking correct.
Yes.
And
yes.
And his problem
and
is he's fighting against Bank of New York Mellon.
Yeah.
Probably Citigroup.
Yep.
What's the other one? Bank of New York Mellon's the big one, by the way, because that traces back to Edmund Safra and Bill Browder and all that.
Yeah.
And all that shit, right? And that's where I get in. I start sitting down and chatting with Martin Armstrong. All of a sudden, I get another 16 levels of history lesson over the last 50 years, right?
Yeah.
So, but the big problem, and what I've noted is when I read. So yesterday, I read that article on Zero Hedge where they were explaining what was happening with the basis trade.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't glaze over on this. This is good. You'll like this. And I read this yesterday morning, and I'm like, so Zero Hedge is out there explaining the problem, right? All these big hedge funds, Citadel, Millennium, a few others. And I'm going to assume, for the lack of a better, I'm going to assume that these people are all shit. They're putting on these stupid basis trades where they're basically betting at massive leverage for a couple of basis points between the futures and the spot treasury market. It's really what it comes down to. But in order to make any money on it, they got to lever up 50 times. Now, when you're 50 times levered, a 2% move against you wipes you out.
Yep.
Okay. So now, why would they put this trade on if it blew up on them in September of 2019 with the repo crisis, the SOFR crisis, if it blew up on them in March of 2020 with COVID, if it blew up on them this here and it blew up here and here, and every time they put this basis trade on at these massive leverage levels, it collapses on them, and then they have to go to the Fed for bailout. It's because where do they get the money for this? How does somebody keep giving them capital to keep doing the same fucking thing over and over again to blow up the financial system unless it's deliberate?
Correct.
It's the only thing that makes any fucking sense.
Correct.
So someone's dumping money into these fucking things in order to use them to create a nuclear bomb to set off in the middle of the financial system when for the last 4 years, the Europeans have been gorging on fucking long-dated U.S. treasuries in order to control fucking bond yields and do yield curve control. And they're sitting on a pile. I mean, everybody's like screaming about China. Well, China dump all their treasury bonds. I was on with Sputnik yesterday. They wanted to talk about this. China's got $700 billion worth of treasuries. They're not interesting. The Europeans have $3.4 trillion.
Yes.
The Bank of England is the Bank of England and its subsidiaries are the biggest holder of U.S. treasuries in the world. When you factor in the Bank of England, the Bank of Ireland, Canada, the British Virgin Islands, Bermuda, the Caymans, now all of a sudden it's like it's $1.8 trillion.
Spider's web.
And
you add in the whole spider's web.
It's all sevens, tens. It's all sevens, tens, 20s, and 30s, folks. It's not ones and twos.
Yeah.
They've been selling the 30s and buying the twos to create a yield curve inversion, to sell a recession, and then they drop this fucking bomb right as the equity markets are at their most vulnerable. And what does Trump do in the middle of that fucking day? We'll put a 90-day hold on all the tariffs. Psych. He's fucking brilliant. He knew exactly what he was fucking doing.
Exactly.
Bissett was there when fucking Soros blew up the Bank of England.
Exactly. So we're going to see more of this. We're going to see more of this.
Every fucking day we're going to see more of it.
What we have to see now, so the fight isn't yet. We're not in it yet. The fight's 3 to 5 years from now. We're just building up. Now we need to know. So that old Buffett saying, right? Not Jimmy Buffett, but Warren Buffett, right? Warren Buffett said, "You can't tell if somebody's covered until the tide goes out."
Not cheeseburger in paradise. What's wrong?
That guy.
Sorry, I thought I'd make a bad joke. Not cheeseburger in paradise.
Well, as long as it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Yeah.
Okay.
The other guy. That's where we are.
The other one.
Yeah, the other guy, the old fella, who lost his second in command, Charlie Munger. What we're seeing. Okay, so these three massive financial institutions are propping most everything up, and they're all fake. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. And they've got all this retirement obligations for all these boomers who are aging out. And how the hell are they going to pay all that? Right? And then we got all the other,
well, the worst part about all three of those companies is that they're not very big companies. They're fake companies.
Correct.
They're they're $40 to $50 billion businesses that control $20 trillion worth of assets.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry, but Jamie, I remember doing a balance sheet read on BlackRock one day, and I just, in the middle of this, I went, about 3 years ago, I went, well, BlackRock's got $40 billion worth of his home shareholder equity.
Yeah.
Like, Jamie Dimon can buy that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Hostile takeover. He can bankrupt BlackRock in an hour.
Yeah.
I remember literally sitting in Miami after doing a speaking gig. I was at a hotel in Miami where I had done a speaking gig to a bunch of high net worth investors. We're sitting out on the balcony. We're sitting out there. Everybody's got their cigars and a double rye, and I'm like, so everyone, I'm Jamie Dimon. I'm looking at BlackRock. Hey, John over at Goldman. Yeah. What do you think? Well, Morgan, the guy over at Morgan, David, what do you think? Like, BlackRock, nice business. Wouldn't you want to own it?
Yeah.
I'll take 25%. You take 10, you take 10. We'll get rid of that fucking Fink guy tomorrow. Because he just tried to shake down our buddy Jerome.
Correct. So this is where we are. Where we are right now is in the early parts of a war. What do? You send out scouts and you send out probes and you test their capabilities and you test who's who. And then you wait to see what comes back.
You find out where
you see how they respond. Correct. And you find out who's really loyal to them and you. And you find out who's on the fence and who might open. Right? So that's where we are right now. Fun times ahead for anybody who can see it. But ultimately, what I believe fundamentally is going to happen is we are going to do the final fucking Brexit that gets us out of the 1688 world.
I am with you 100%, dude. Like,
and if we can do it, and if we can do it, it unlocks, right? It unlocks. It would be the equivalent of Constantine defeating the Praetorians and their emperor at the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312. And then the Byzantium Empire emerges out of that. It would literally be that kind of a moment.
I think Tom froze up.
Yeah.
Tom froze. Explain that for me. What the Battle of 325?
312 Milvian Bridge. Constantine. So I wrote about this on Twitter, the Praetorian threads. The Praetorians had actually been in control of Rome and the Roman Empire since Augustus. There was no actual emperor since then that really had any power, not even Marcus Aurelius, Hadrian, the others. It was the Praetorians. And they were the security also for judges, for generals, et cetera, et cetera. So the Praetorians were the ones that were in control of the Roman Empire so then I can't remember if it was Vespasian or one of the others, they separated out power and moved a center of power ostensibly to control the empire better to Constantinople, what would become Constantinople. Why? Because it was physically defensible. And it was in the richest part of the empire, which was the east. That power they built, they didn't use Praetorians, right? So the Eastern emperor, and there was two of them, he didn't use Praetorians. They did it on purpose. And they did this for about 100 years. And then finally, Constantine in 312 went back and crushed the Praetorians irrefutably, killed the emperor, their puppet emperor that they had elevated. And then the Praetorians that had survived, he scattered them across the empire, said, if you ever come back together again, I'll kill you. And he did. But what it did is it broke the power of the Praetorians over the Roman Empire. It was really the Praetorians and their theft, in this case, the Continentals through London, right? It was their theft of all the resources, production, assets, turning everybody against everybody that really brought Rome down. And it took Constantine and this separate power base, so like the United States out of London, right, out of England, to establish that power base. And then he went back and just crushed them in battle. And out of that, Byzantium emerged. And it is, when everybody talks about Western civilization, Western culture, and they talk about the Greeks and the Romans, etc. If there was a Western civilization, it was actually Byzantium, which was Roman, Hellenized Roman, right? Orthodox Christianity,
Yes.
all of these great scientific advances that were borrowed from the Middle East. If there was any argument of a Western civilization, it would actually be Byzantium.
And that would fit. And by the way, that would fit in terms of Muslim, Orthodox, and Jewish eschatology as well. And, what little I understand of it. What I was going to say, and I figured out why I was still. When I had my brownout earlier, I got connected to the wrong friggin' Wi-Fi. Now I'm back on the proper Wi-Fi, and now the connection's stable. I'm like, oh, that's what's going on, right?
Awesome.
So, what I was going to say is what I've been saying is that and it popped into my head one day. I agree with you. That's a great story, but what I said was, if Donald Trump is even half as successful as he wants to be, he'll be the most consequential person since Genghis Khan. In that, today there's 1 billion descendants of Genghis Khan around the world because of the amount of change that he brought about. It's a different way of saying the same thing.
Totally agree. But what made that possible was not. So Genghis had a general named Subutai. He wasn't even Mongol. He was one of the forest people. And Subutai served all 5 great Khans.
Right.
Till he's in his 70s. He ran 5 wars simultaneously in the steppes in Europe, etc., in ways that nobody could coordinate again until the Germans in World War II. But point being is that Genghis Khan had Subutai. And this is not exaggeration. I mean, this is.
I'm laughing now because I'm like, oh, my Taekwondo instructor loved this guy. That was his his name. I know. I have a guy.
So point being, though, is I fundamentally agree with you. None of it would have got started and happened were it not for Genghis Khan. But he also had the Subutai, who was consistent across the next 4, and he had 4 more descendants in that line, right? The rule of 4, you got to get past the first generation. And if you can get into the third. So I agree with you. We possibly are having a Genghis Khan, we need to see if we survive. We need to see if we can get into this actual fight in 3 to 5 years. And then there's going to have to be continuity for at least the next 20 years, maybe the next 40 years for it to all stick.
Yeah, agreed completely. I absolutely agree, and I think our mutual friend Alex Craner has laid out the nascent version of it. You can see tweets from Elon Musk talking about the Bering Strait and this. What I said about 6 or 8 months ago, I think I might have put this in Alex's head one day, which is why he started writing about this. Which is that take the globe and stop. When you look at a globe, don't center it on Europe.
Yeah,
move it to the Pacific Ocean,
Yeah.
and you see it's a boring map, but you see the three
Yeah.
great powers of the 21st century and into the 22nd century. It's the United States, Russia, and China.
I
And it's
saw another variant of that where you take the Mercator map
mhm,
and you flip it upside down
mhm,
and you see China, US, Russia is a
mhm,
ring, right?
mhm,
It's the base and everything else is sitting on top of that.
mhm. Yeah,
There's another
that's
great
another
way to
good.
do that. Flip the
Yeah,
map
that's
upside down and yeah,
yeah, that's
we
very
are the
that's
base.
and it's very obvious as to why that needs to happen. And of course, it's
Yeah.
the main reason why anybody would ever why everybody wants to stop it from happening.
Yeah, so
So
the one piece in there is Canada. And
Canada's not.
I have a suspicion because we're already seeing Alberta pull away and other things. But I have a suspicion that there are some of the Commonwealth assets that the United States is going to acquire from Britain and from the Crown so that we can recapitalize them so they can least, so we don't completely leave them on the board as an enemy. And that's
Yeah, no,
another
we don't want to.
piece. We
No, we don't
can't.
want to.
They
No, we
still got
cannot.
too much capacities, too much ability to cause too much chaos and harm in the world, right? The
Agreed.
Commonwealth is
And
still real, 2 billion people. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have to. It's really really important. Um, I think that's I've heard this story, and I think it's a fairy tale personally about that effectively Canada's already in receivership,
Yeah.
and that I don't I think that's
Yeah.
I think that's
No.
a complete story,
Nah.
complete
Yeah.
non I
Yeah.
think it's complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Um, but it's very clear. I'm in contact with the people with Alberta. I'm going to be in Calgary in a month actually,
Awesome.
and
Awesome.
I'll be renewing ties with the people out there, and the question now is really, is Danielle Smith the real deal, or can she
Yeah.
be
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
dragged kicking and screaming across the line to be the real deal?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's all going to come down to what happens at the April 28th election. But I'll tell you right now that they are going to fight like hell to retain Canada, and they
I
don't
don't
have
think
any
it's,
cards.
no,
I don't think they have any cards to play.
we can't let them have Canada
No, cannot let them have
because that's
Canada.
the natural resources they need to plus up their militaries and go
And
straight
it's the
Nazi again.
and we
Yeah.
need to have a land bridge with Alaska. It's just that simple.
I
And so
agree.
we're going to need Alberta, British Columbia. They can leave Vancouver as a Chinese city state, and then we'll and
Kowloon too.
that,
Kowloon City too.
yeah, Kowloon, yeah, exactly, and that'll be fine. And then we'll kick them into the ocean at that point, or that's fine. We'll leave it there, and then they'll let the Chinese have their port of entry, but we know where they come in from.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. I want the Yukon.
I think we just
love
solved all the
Yukon.
world's problems. Yeah, I think we're good.
Well, if only we had more kids so that we could plus up
I got started very late, and we
So
tried
did
to
I.
have a second one. It didn't work, but we
Yeah,
did our
yeah,
best.
yeah.
We're now encouraging our daughter, who's turning 19 on Sunday, to have a basketball team. But what are we going to do? It's the only time
There you go.
I'll ever invoke a shitty game like basketball in a positive light. Everybody should have 5 children. So,
Awesome. Awesome.
I was gonna say, Tom, and we can keep going, but I know you said before.
I would like to.
Yeah,
I would like to at least make an appearance in there and
Yeah,
yell
yeah,
at Dave and tell him Pizzagate was real.
yeah. Shut up, Dave.
Because they're probably because if I'm this late, I have already become a chicken fucker
Yeah,
and,
no, and I know,
and many other things. Whenever I do
know
a
the
show with
playbook.
Dave, and
I know the playbook. You need to go
you know
in
the
there
playbook.
and fucking show up late, but just start mag dumping. Don't go in.
Yeah, at that point I'm gonna be like,
Always hit
yeah.
Jim because
Start with
he's always surprised
frag.
by it. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Throw a frag in.
Go at Jim
Yeah.
first because he's very gentle and sweet. He never expects it.
yeah, he is.
When
He's
Dave's
too
laughing,
nice.
then you go at Dave when Dave's in a hysterical of laughing. There's a method. Go kill
There's
him.
a method.
For
All right,
everybody
man.
listening,
Guys.
yeah, please go in the descriptions. Please go. Well, it's not live. I don't know why I said listening. Go follow them on Twitter. Go follow his YouTube, your blog, your Substack, your Patreon. All that shit is in there. Gentlemen, we'll do it again. Thank you so
Appreciate
much
it,
for your
Tom.
time.
Thank you. Tom, pleasure.
All right, guys.
All
Take
the best,
care.
Ian.